These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for news readers. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading about Thunderdome politics, an uncivil war taking back our democracy in an age of Trumpian disinformation and Thunderdome politics by Greg Sargent, the Washington Post columnist. This is from his chapter on voter suppression. It's page 37. Republicans and Democrats inhabit different political realities, as mentioned in a previous chapter. But there are certain facts about our politics that are just objectively true. One of them is this. Generally speaking, efforts to make it harder to vote are almost always pushed by Republicans. You cannot understand what is happening in American politics right now without recognizing this stark and very fundamental difference between the two major political parties. During this decade, procedural hurdles were put into place in around 20 states that in some manner or other have made it harder to vote or to register to vote, or have undone previous efforts to make voting or registering easier, or have otherwise threatened serious disenfranchisement. Most of them were the creation of Republican lawmakers and officials. The difference in the two parties' national platforms for 2016 tells the story. The GOP platform champions additional hurdles that are absurdly disproportionate to the phantom abuse it alleges, while the Democratic platform champions multiple specific ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. The most common and controversial of methods used by Republicans to suppress Democratic turnout is the requirement that would-be voters present identification at the polls. The game here tends to turn on requiring forms of ID that some groups are less likely to have, making participation harder for them. Other restrictions include techniques like cutting back on early voting and making it harder to register, both of which have, in recent years, been instituted in multiple states. Republicans who have passed laws making it harder to vote have tended to claim such measures are necessary to protect against, quote, voter fraud. We'll look at this in more detail below, but for now, note that most of the states that have passed such measures did so while under Republican control. As New York University political scientist Samuel Isikoff has memorably put it, the single predictor necessary to determine whether a state will impose voter access restrictions is whether Republicans control the ballot access process. Scholars trace the modern era of warfare over election rules to the intensely contested presidential election of 2000. In which a divided Supreme Court halted the recount in Florida, throwing the presidency to George W. Bush. The closeness and partisan acrimony of that contest, combined with the intense national focus on election rules that accompanied the court battle over it, helped persuade both parties to invest much more attention and energy on those rules. As a result, both the implementation of measures restricting the ballot and the legal battles over them have intensified in recent years. A brief glance at the surprising history of voter ID laws begins to tell the story of this tightening. In the 1970s, Several states implemented voter ID measures, but all of them provided for ways that voters without the proper ID could cast a ballot. By 2000, there were 14 such laws, and they had been implemented by politicians in both parties. But by the mid-2000s, amid rising post-2000 acrimony, a handful of red states began implementing voter ID laws that the nonpartisan National Conference of State Legislatures described as, quote, strict, meaning that they make it easy to disqualify those who don't pass muster. After one of those laws in Indiana was challenged and then upheld in 2008 by the Supreme Court, an escalation began that gained momentum in the Obama era. From 2010 onward, the adoption of voter ID laws in general and of strict ones in particular accelerated. Though a handful were blocked in the courts, as of this writing, a total of 34 states have voter ID laws in effect, 24 that are deemed non-strict and 10 that are deemed strict. The strict ones are in red states or in swing states where they were implemented by Republicans. The story is very similar if you evaluate the state's voting rules in a broader way, by including not just voter ID measures, but also cutbacks to early voting and restrictions on registration. Here the trend is just as pronounced. After the 2010 elections, the Brennan Center for Justice documented a sharp rise in efforts to pass such measures in the state legislatures across the country. Not all these efforts bore fruit, but many did. By the time voting took place in Election Day 2016, some 14 states had these new restrictions in place for the first time in a presidential election. Now, as of this writing, by the Brennan Center's count, some 20 states have successfully implemented either strict voting ID requirements or cutbacks to early voting or restrictions on registration or other measures with meaningful disenfranchising effects. If you're a liberal who's frustrated by the seemingly unbreakable Republican dominance of national politics, not to mention GOP control of most state governments across the country, then the chances are that these restrictions figure heavily into your explanation of this GOP supremacy. Indeed, social media has been absolutely saturated in recent years with variations of the lament that Republican political dominance is largely maintained through a combination of nefarious and undemocratic tactics, such as ballot restrictions that keep constituencies unfriendly to the GOP from voting, and extreme gerrymanders that have, in effect, built a fortress around the GOP's majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats frequently.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Wow, a lot going on in the news today we will be getting to as we continue through the program. In our third hour, with this amazing new ad, the cure for limp democracy. We'll get to that. And our geeky science, new concern, wildlife passing on the COVID virus. In our second hour, breaking now, the tragic plight of the children of wealthy people exposed. My op-ed today over at Hartmann Report. And Naveed Shah, one of the best ways to help disabled vets is to pass the voting rights bill. We'll get to that in the second hour. In this hour, I want to get into what jurists don't know about Kyle Rittenhouse and the fact that he was essentially a right-wing terrorist taking pictures and flashing white power signs with Proud Boys after he killed 2 people. Why do Americans look at away as Fox News basically loads their gun and shoots them, virus-wise? We'll get into that. But right now, Jennifer Stefano is with us. Jennifer is a Republican strategist, the vice president of the Commonwealth Foundation, a fellow with the Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org, CommonwealthFoundation.org. Jennifer Stefano is her Twitter handle, and or at IWF. And Jennifer, the vast majority of people who are making a pile of money in America have paid leave. This is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 95% of people in the top 10% of income earners in the United States have some form of paid sick leave. Among the lowest 10th, only 33% have that access. In the highest wage group, 43% have paid family leave, compared with just 6% in the bottom group. The thesis that I'm putting forward here is that we're confusing welfare with basic foundational stuff that a society should have in order for people to have a reasonable standard of living. And it seems to me that paid family leave, it went from 12 weeks in the Build Back Better bill, and then over the objections of Joe Manchin down to 0, and then now it's coming back up to 4 weeks, and we'll see where this goes. But I would argue that that is just the core stuff that a society should, that the citizens of a society should expect to have available to them. It is available in every other developed country in the world, after all. What say you?
Yeah, and I think you're seeing a big increase in paid leave in the private sector. And I also share your concern about how we're helping low-income people, and both men and women. I am really tired of this being offered only to women. It should be offered to everyone across the board. And my concern is that a big government federal program, which according to the Congressional Budget Office will already be bankrupt when you start it, is not the answer. Tom, my concern is that a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work. And there is research that shows that it is very costly to women and actually suppresses our wages and our employment opportunities. And we've seen that not just in states in America that have done it, but in other countries.
How can it be costly to women to get 4 weeks off when they give birth?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we become a liability in the marketplace. When you only offer it to women, we become more costly than men.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, what if we just offered it to everybody? I mean, I agree with you. This is, right. These kind of things should not be just for women. I, totally agree with you.
Okay, I'm glad you're saying that, because I really am tired of men need to step up and they need to be fathers. Also, what about gay men? Does one of them have to choose to be maternal? I just want to proudly say at my institution, the Commonwealth Foundation, we have 12 weeks family leave for both genders, and we have unlimited PTO because we believe people need to take care of their family, whatever that may look like. And you don't have to have a child even, but you may have someone sick that you need to take care of. So we did it in the private sector, and we did it because we do believe it matters. We are one of the 70% of the Americans that believe paid family leave is important. We give 12 full weeks, and what you've seen over more than a decade is that the private sector continues to step up. Now, you're asking, why isn't it accelerated? If we could do it as a federal mandate, wouldn't that be better? My answer is no. I actually think that'll be highly costly, because there is a cultural issue here, Tom, and that is this. It's that largely men tend not to take this time off, thus still making women feel like more of a liability when we do take it. And higher wage earners tend to be offered it because they tend not to take it. And what happens is, if you do a big federal mandate like this, there's been some studies in states that have done it that show that it actually benefits middle and upper middle class women and doesn't help lower income women as intended. So while I concur with the premise, a one-size-fits-all federal mandate isn't the answer. I think we can look at other solutions.
Then I would argue that it simply wasn't done right if that was the outcome. But the simple fact of the matter is that what you and your organization, Commonwealth Foundation, have done, which is commendable, is only available to 6% of the low-wage workers in the United States. And you're not going to see American business suddenly get enlightened, particularly when it comes to people who are making minimum wage, or even in the bottom, I'd say half of the American workforce. So if you believe, Jennifer, if you truly believe that this is something that should be available to everybody, not just wealthy white people who work at Commonwealth Foundation, or let me take the race out of it, wealthy people or upper middle class people who work at Commonwealth Foundation, then shouldn't government either, well, I'm not even going to ask it as a question, I'm just going to make the assertion. It seems to me that your concern is, oh my God, if we make this a government program and government pays those 12 weeks, because there's a lot of small employers who probably can't deal with the expense of that, then some billionaire is going to have to pay more in taxes, and oh my God, we can't have that. That is the essence of your argument, is it not?
No, I think if you guys ever want to win anything, you have to stop pretending like all you need to do is tax the rich. Like, fine, tax the rich. Like, great, you won't have.
The rich are paying like less than 1% in income taxes. Let's start with just reasonable taxes for rich people.
Let me finish. You guys cannot fund all these programs you want by just taxing the rich. You are going to have to convince the American people, who are not stupid, because they know this, that it is going to cost all of us. It is not just going to stay with the rich. It never does.
Then how do they do it in every other developed country in the world, Jennifer? What's so unique about America that only in America we can't tax the rich?
They have walked back these programs because of the unintended consequences, particularly for women. So I just want to be, and Denmark, I would strongly encourage you and your followers to go look at what happened in Denmark to women and how it suppressed career growth and wage growth. You can look to California as well, who did this. And you saw a huge increase in the length of unemployment, especially for younger women.
So do it across both genders, as you suggested. I mean, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
So, but let me say this, there is a cost. So right now, the suggestion is that it would be 0.4% to the payroll tax. Well, Tom, that will put the program immediately into a $7 billion deficit. The Congressional Budget Office, which is not a partisan office, says by 2028, in order to in any way fund this program, you're going to need to increase payroll taxes by 240%. Now, the rich can sustain it. The middle class, maybe. But who are you crushing? You're crushing the working poor. And by the way, in states like Pennsylvania, we're doing a big poverty project. 56% of low income.
Then let's just pay for it out of the general fund. $6 billion is nothing out of the general fund. I mean, we're getting $800 billion a year for defense. We can't spend $6 billion to help out people who just had a death in the family or who just gave birth of both genders.
You are still only this inevitably will go and benefit these upper middle class women that you do not want to fund. Because I am telling you what has happened in states that have done this. You're only going to be funding 66% of the wages for low income workers. And oftentimes in a one income household, particularly if it's headed by a female, they cannot afford to take that lead.
The proposal in Build Back Better pays 90% of wages for the bottom 10% of workers in America, not 66%.
No, the program would fund 66% of the wages for paid family leave. Now, that can change.
Workers making $15,000 or less a year would receive the highest wage replacement rate, 90%. But they will have had to have earned $2,000 in the 2 years prior, as well as some level of income immediately preceding the leave. Which is just designed to prevent people who are, just hopped into the job market the week before they got, pregnant or something like that from claiming this or gave birth.
Okay, and I don't know, why are we penalizing them? If it's a benefit offered by their government, why shouldn't they jump in and get that, right? You guys don't believe in work requirements around welfare? I mean, let's just be really honest. That there is wage fraud and abuse, and it's much harder to rout out in big federal programs, which is why they become so costly. And then women or men who legitimately need the help cannot get it. If you look at a study of these programs, and there's really great research out there from you can look at the Cato Institute, you can look at the Brookings, that shows inevitably these programs, like
right-wing think tanks are always going to show this. Look at the Economic Policy Institute. A left-wing think tank has found largely the exact opposite. I mean, either this is the right thing to do, and we as a society should figure out how to make sure it's available to people, not just to the wealthy people, the 95% who have, in the top 10% of income earners, but also to the bottom 10% who only have 6% access to these kind of things. We either do it or we don't.
Yeah, I concur. The question is, how do we do it? Where you and I are having a debate is not on the virtuous nature of whether or not we want.
No, it's whether it's the role of government. Absolutely. And I'm saying it is.
Businesses are hard.
As the owner of a small business, I'm saying it is.
They're all super progressive and woke. So my first question is, all these woke people, Delta, Coca-Cola, why aren't y'all yelling at that? They are hardly conservative, okay? So they're not doing it in the free market.
Woke slurs aside, we're debating whether this should be something that we as a country agree should happen. And either we could pass a law saying every employer must offer this, which I'm pretty sure that's how it works in Germany. I lived in Germany for a year, and I knew a person who was on, paid leave at the time, and they were getting it from the organization that I worked for. But I'm sure that there's all kinds of nuance to that. But either we do it as a country, either we mandate employers, or we pick up the tab. I mean, what other choices are there other than saying to low-income workers, tough luck, you're on your own, which is what you're suggesting?
My first thing is I think it's a false narrative to say we either federally mandate it or we do nothing. My first
or we
thought
federally
is,
pay for it.
We can make a societal compact that we want to strengthen families. Although I will say the progressives have been doing a lot of work saying that families are, in fact, structures of white supremacy, Tom. So the mere fact...
Oh, come on, Jennifer.
Tom, Google the National Family Council. I will send it to you. Yeah. They are doing a webinar on how the traditional family is a structure of white supremacy. That is correct.
Okay, that's a whole nother discussion for a whole other time. I'm sorry, Jennifer, at 18 after we hit a hard break. There's nothing I can do to stop it. Jennifer Stefano with the Commonwealth Foundation, CommonwealthFoundation.org, Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org. Jennifer Stefano on Twitter. Jennifer, thank you for dropping by.
Thanks. I always love being on with you.
Thanks. Good talking with you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hour. What say you? Should government do this? Should we mandate that private employers do this? Both? Not at all? And what do we do about, Joe Manchin saying we got to take paid leave out of the Build Back Better law, or bill, rather. Amazing. Anyhow, picking up your phone calls here, Anita in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Anita. Thanks for listening to Progressive Voices. What's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, the government already requires paid family leave. And in the government, women have not been hurt by that. They hold higher positions in government than anywhere else.
Wait a minute. Do you mean that state or federal governments are already offering paid family leave?
Yes, they already offer. They don't. They have to. They have to offer paid family leave, and I'm probably even the contractors to the government. I'm not really sure about that, but I know the government does, and we don't see it hurting women within the government. I mean, yes, there may be problems societally with men not taking it as much as women, but you have to deal with that when that happens. I mean, I don't know what her sources are. I'm sure her sources are conservative think tanks.
Cato Institute is what she cited.
Yeah, exactly. So
which used to be the Charles Koch Foundation.
If she really believes in stronger families, then of course you want. Then she would support.
Anita, your phone started breaking up really badly. I'm not sure what you did.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it works.
Okay, so yeah, if you really believe in stronger families, you want people to take family leave, and a lot of people don't take it because it's not paid. When when fathers are able to stay home, that strengthens the family. When people are able to stay home with a sick relative or whatever, or a sick child or whatever they have to do to take that family leave, it strengthens the family. It doesn't weaken the family. I don't understand why the bottom line for some of these people is always the dollar, right? It'll cost these businesses this much. Well, you want stronger families because we want a stronger country, we want a stronger community of people in our workforce.
Yeah.
Don't we? I mean,
and we want to strengthen families. We want to provide people with an opportunity both to be productive in the workforce and to raise a family. And it seems like this is just a simple thing, and I don't understand why Joe Manchin is so opposed to it.
I don't understand. I don't understand a lot that Joe Manchin is opposed to. I mean, the people, and I certainly don't understand Kirsten Sinema. But I don't understand why these people are so against this. I really don't. To me, it seems like common sense. I don't know what country she's talking about where it's not working out for people, because I've talked to people that are from Finland and they are very happy with it. Or I know one of my friends is from Austria. She got it like a year off when she had a baby.
Yeah.
So, these people are happier people. You have the happier workers. You're going to have a better workforce when they're happy. When they're, when they don't have to worry all the time.
And you have a better society when kids are raised well, when parents have time to bond with their children, particularly early in life. You have, children who grow up to be well-adjusted people rather than growing up to be crazies like, they go out and shoot people at protests.
Well, maybe that's the whole idea. They want happy, contented people. They want crazy people, because obviously that's the party of a lot of the people there.
Party of crazy. Yeah, there you go. Anita, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Great points all. It's spot on. You really nailed it. We'll be right back. It's 22 minutes past the hour. I've got some more to share with you about Fox News. Weird stuff going on. Stick around. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So Sweden had this epidemiologist guy, not a physician, who was in charge for a while of their response to COVID, they've put together a commission to look into, what screwed up so badly. Why did so many Swedes die? In Brazil, they got the second worst rate of COVID infection and deaths in the world, behind us. And their Senate put together a 1,000+ page report, basically saying that President Jair Bolsonaro should be tried for mass murder and crimes against humanity. Here in the United States, we've got this massive death toll, the worst in the world, certainly one of the worst in the developed world anyway. And we're doing basically nothing about it. We're not looking into it. Can you imagine if when Barack Obama was president, 700,000 Americans died? I mean, keep in mind, 4 Americans died at Benghazi, dozens of congressional hearings, 11 hours of testimony from Hillary Clinton. We've got a video about all this over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Okay, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of other things I wanted to just flag for you. In addition to, since the rich already have paid family leave, why deny it to the poor? And should the government be funding it, or should we require that employers do so? It's an interesting conversation, if nothing else, but it really is consequential because right now there are 4 weeks of paid family leave in the Build Back Better legislation that Congress is supposed to vote on next week. And Joe Manchin is already making noises about, Meanwhile, over at Fox News, this Media Matters, if you just go to MediaMatters.org and just look at the headlines, they're just a shocking stuff going on. New poll shows a vicious cycle of COVID-19 misinformation, and Fox News is part of it. This is a new Kaiser Family Foundation poll. They found that the Republican voters' #1 most trusted source of information is Fox News, and there is a strong correlation between trusting Fox News and believing one or more pieces of COVID-19 misinformation. They also found a whopping 84% of the Republicans either believe or are unsure about whether the government has exaggerated the number of COVID deaths. This goes back to Fox back when Trump was president, saying, oh, not that many people are dying, and it's just, people are dying of comorbidity. All right. Fox has undermined vaccines nearly every day in the past 6 months. From April through September, Fox aired at least one claim undermining the vaccination efforts on all but 2 days. Again, Media Matters laying this out and documenting it. It's pretty shocking. Fox personalities trying to distance themselves from Fox's vaccine mandate. In fact, they've got a shareholder meeting coming up this week or this month in Los Angeles. It's going to require vaccine passports and masks. But on the air, their personalities are saying, oh, we don't have a mandate here. We have a policy. Right. At Fox News, if you're not vaccinated, you have to be tested not once a week, every single day. Okay, so there's that. And then finally, why is it that the jury in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial is not being shown, for example, the picture of him after he murdered 2 people, standing with a Proud Boy, flashing the white power salute? Why is that? Why are these things? This guy was on a mission. He came from another state and brought a gun with him, and the prosecution is arguing, that this against self-defense. Why are they not arguing that this guy is a terrorist, a racially motivated terrorist? What am I missing here?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's 27 minutes past the hour. Back with your calls after this.
Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980, because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret, part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum No. 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so that South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Leave. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Canada, 51 weeks of paid family leave. It's amazing. By the way, it's Veterans Day. It's November 11th. And, you know, a salute to all our veterans out there. We have one here in the studio. In fact, Joyce is a veteran and came in and gave us her PFC Joyce salute this morning. But there's a trending hashtag, you know, so support veterans and pass voting rights. I'm sorry, I have this hashtag wrong. I don't have it right in front of me, but I retweeted it earlier this morning. That if we really want to support our veterans, this is a Common Defense came out with this. This means more than just giving statements of gratitude and support in a year of unprecedented attacks on our democracy. Honoring veterans must include action on behalf of veterans, including their freedom to vote. So let's do that on Veterans Day. It's also my 49th anniversary. So Louise, I love you. Thank you for 49 great years. Actually longer than, 49 years we've been married. We've been together longer than that. And in fact, we were married at 11 on 11/11 at 11:11 a.m., which is also when the armistice for World War I was signed. Very interesting. Okay, back to Kyle Rittenhouse. I want to just lay this down, and then I'm going to pick up your phone calls. First of all, here's a kid who is essentially a wannabe cop, and you know, well marinated in the whole right-wing sphere of authoritarianism and copism, and he's hooked up with white supremacists after he killed 2 people and blew the bicep off another one, you know, injured for the rest of his life, a 3rd person. Kyle Rittenhouse, with a big smile on his face, is flashing the white power sign as he's being photographed with a Proud Boy, you know, with you know, an openly white power group. I think that, you know, frankly, the best thing that can happen is for this case to actually have a mistrial and start all over again with a different judge, a judge who doesn't have Donald Trump's campaign theme song as his ringtone. Did you catch this? I believe it was yesterday, the judge, you know, during the trial, the judge's phone went off and it was Donald Trump's theme song. The judge's phone. So declare a mistrial, have a different judge, and have a different prosecutor. Instead of trying to knock down a self-defense claim, how about building a claim that this kid never should have had an AR-15 in the first place? He's 17 years old. He couldn't legally have an AR-15. He couldn't legally possess it. He carried it across state lines. He showed up at what he thought was a riot. And, you know, at a protest or both. I mean, whatever you want to call it, he showed up there with a rifle. And that in and of itself is a crime. Why is he not being prosecuted for that? And then in the process of committing that crime, he, by the way, committed 2 murders. Now, I'm not a lawyer. Maybe a lawyer out there can tell me where I'm wrong on this, but you know, basically, Rittenhouse's entire defense is, I was a volunteer cop, and he's using the same defense that police who are accused of killing people in the line of duty use. He literally had memorized a number of these things and said, you know, over and over and over again when he was testifying that, you know, the guy that I shot reached for my gun. Well, cops say that, right? I was afraid for my life. Cops say that. That's the justification for pulling the trigger. I fired until the threat was eliminated. That's like cop speak. I just used force to defend myself. Cop speak. I used the legal amount of force authorized to protect myself and others. Mortos has a great thread about this, by the way, over at Democratic Underground right now. And I agree with Mortos, by the way, that and he notes, he says, can you imagine how quickly a black 17-year-old carrying an illegally obtained assault rifle would be convicted of murder if he went to a right-wing anti-vax protest and shot anybody who tried to disarm him? In fact, Rittenhouse was the criminal. He was illegally in possession of an AR-15. Somebody grabbed it and tried to disarm him, to take it away from him, and he killed them. The person who tried to take away his gun was actually the one who was trying to prevent violence. He was trying to take away Rittenhouse's gun. Or am I missing something here? Anyhow, a whole bunch of rants here. Ian in Sixton, Missouri. Hey, Ian, I see you wanted to talk about Max Cleland. Max Cleland was my senator when I lived in Georgia. He was a good guy, and he was trashed by, I believe it was Sonny Perdue ran against him and claimed that he was not a patriot. In fact, they had an ad where...
Saxby Chambliss.
Saxby Chambliss, thank you. Yeah, they had this ad where they morphed Bin Laden's face onto, or in split screen or whatever, with Max Cleland. It was just a crime. Anyhow, Ian, let you do the rant rather than me. Go for it.
Yeah, I was reading the paper and I seen that in there. I didn't see anything on the national news about it. You know, there was nothing on the national news
about the fact that Max Cleland had been slandered by Saxby Chambliss.
Well, that he'd even passed away that I could see.
Oh.
You know, I'm a small town in southeast Missouri.
Yeah.
And we got a small paper, but it was in there.
Yeah.
And I was in Georgia. I voted for Jimmy Carter. I was in Georgia at that time. I worked there my whole life and retired and moved back to Missouri. And when that happened, you know, it just blew my mind that he would go to such extent just to win a race.
And he won the race, too, Saxby Chambliss.
Yeah, he won the race. Yeah, he won it, yeah. It was just, you know, and it's all that stuff comes back to me when I see somebody's name, and then what's all going on today.
Yeah. And for people, yep. And for people who don't know what we're talking about, Ian, you know, today's Veterans Day, but also this was, you know, Max Cleland lost 3 limbs. He lost both arms and a leg in Vietnam, and then a Republican accused him of supporting terrorism, and that's how he got kicked out of the Senate, or got replaced in the Senate.
You know, it kind of reminds you of Trump talking about McCain, you know.
Yeah, Trump, Mr. Bone Spurs, yes. Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah. Okay, Ian, thank you very much for that. Very well said. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Happy anniversary, Tom.
Thank you.
Happy Veterans Day to Joyce. We are on the same exact wavelength. There are 3 things the Rittenhouse and the Ahmaud Arbery trial have in common. First, there shouldn't even be these trials. They're false claims of self-defense. A jogger hunted, outnumbered by 3 Ku Klux Klan members. Rittenhouse wearing a red fanny pack with a roll of gauze, claiming he's an EMT. A medic with an AK-15 fully loaded to kill 30 people? There's no such thing.
Right.
So the second thing these both have in common, these should be prosecuted as hate crimes. Where is our DOJ? We need a conscious DOJ. I'm sorry, I'm getting all railed up again. None of these defenses are paying for their own lawyers. They're funded through a site that they pay the insurrectionists legal fees to. And I can even throw number 4 in. Trump is watching these. This is his entertainment. He was the one who spoke up for Rittenhouse right away, and we gave him what he wanted.
Yeah, I think the most dangerous outcome of this, Jessica, is that all over the country there are right-wing yahoos with assault weapons who are thinking, next protest I go to, I'm going to kill some people. Apparently there's no consequence for that.
Yes. And this is a set-up trial. This is a phony trial. The prosecution talks back to the judge. Are you kidding me? The judge yells and screams.
Yeah.
He's so awful. We know know, Mitch McConnell fought to have all those drama king judges in place. Merrick Garland needs to stop this. They're false trials, and they should be hate crimes.
Well, these are both state trials, so Merrick Garland has he has no part in this right now. I mean, theoretically, if Rittenhouse gets off, he could be sued by the federal government for denying the civil rights of the people who he killed or something like that. But yeah.
Aren't they hate crimes?
Well, that's my point. He could be prosecuted for a hate crime, but he's not being Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying that Merrick Garland needs to come in and file hate crime charges against the guys in Georgia and against Rittenhouse.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. But I think let's get the murder stuff out of the way first. The prosecution in this case is just blowing my mind. Jessica, thank you for the call. Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey there, Tom. Last lady, she's spot on 100%. Happy anniversary to you. Ours is the 14th.
Hey, happy anniversary to you, Steve. 3 days in advance.
Thank you, buddy. What I was going to say was we need this paid family leave here. It's extremely important. And Manchin and Sinema not wanting to go forward.
Well, we don't know about Sinema. It's Joe Manchin who's kind of single-handedly opposing this.
Okay, they both have their own agenda for different causes.
Yes.
But we know they're both on the dole from different industries, pharmaceutical and oil, respectively. And I also feel that it's possibly the Republicans might be feathering their nest too, and if not, I think they are, and I think McConnell's telling them just don't do anything, just stay Democrats, muck things up, and it makes Joe look bad. That's my feeling, and I hope they prove me wrong. But I've got a personal story here I'd like to tell you here about why we need this family leave. Back in '95, my mom developed cancer for the second time, and I had to go back to Wisconsin on my own dime, lose pay for 2 different sets of occasions in March and also in May, and she finally passed away end of May. And I didn't, at least thanks to Bill Clinton, I was able to keep my job but get off, but I was not paid. It didn't go far enough. So I've got my home payment here. Thankfully, my wife was working, and that helped. But I'm still lack of stuff. And also, by the way, my mom didn't have health insurance in 1962 when she got her original cancer. My dad dropped the policy, so she had a $20,000 hospital bill. And a home was $20,000 back then. Yeah. So she paid that off about 6 months before she died. Wow. So not only do we need Medicare for all, we need paid family leave, because everybody has a situation and it comes up, and the poor people are the ones who always hit the hardest. Yeah. That's all what I got to say, Tom.
I'm with you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. That was a good one. Mike in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, guys. Good afternoon. Happy Veterans Day to everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, and I just real quickly, we have to be careful because I kind of disagree with what you guys are saying about Rittenhouse. The gun wasn't purchased in Illinois. It was purchased in Wisconsin illegally, I believe, and it was stored in Wisconsin. So he didn't bring the gun across state lines. That's why he didn't get charged with that crime. And,
you sure about that?
I don't.
Because I have repeatedly heard that he brought that gun with him, and
he had his friend who lived in Wisconsin purchase the gun because he was not old enough.
Okay.
And his friend had the gun, he brought it. So that's why he did not carry it.
So he crossed state lines, but the gun didn't.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. So distincts without a difference, I don't know.
All right.
I think also, I think we're just reading, I think we read too much into this. I think we have an idiot 17-year-old kid, and I think we have a bunch of, I don't want to call them hoodlums, but idiots that tried to attack a 17-year-old kid who happened to have a gun, and I think all of them are idiots.
Well, I think you've got a racist 17-year-old kid who thought that he was going to. I mean, this was not the George Floyd protest. This was the protest after another black man had been killed in Kenosha.
Yeah,
I
don't think he was racist. I think he was an idiot.
Oh, well, then why is he flashing the white power sign when he's hanging out with the Proud Boys after he killed the 2 people?
Well, I don't know what white sign you're talking about. I don't
well, I go to probably, let's see, I'm pretty sure it's over at democraticunderground.com right now. You can actually see the picture. It's right there. Anyhow, we'll be right back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Holly in Marshall, Missouri. Hey, Holly, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I called about the child
and family leave.
Sorry, I'm very nervous.
Yeah, the family leave thing. Yeah.
I've had some discussions with people here. I live in Missouri, and they're very opposed to giving low-income women money, saying they're lazy, and then saying, well, they shouldn't have children. These people shouldn't have children. So I said, then I suppose you're for abortion rights. Oh, no, we're pro-life. We don't believe in
They shouldn't have
death.
children, and they shouldn't have sex.
And they shouldn't have sex, and they closed the Planned Parenthood. There's only one left where women have to undergo all of these atrocious examinations and stay 2 days and all of that, and it's very hard on them to even get there, and I'm not even sure they still do abortions. And the other thing I just wanted to let you know is that Amy Vanderpool is covering this trial very well, this Rittenhouse trial, and putting it all on Twitter, and that's where the thing that upset me was that the judge would not let the prosecutor use the word victim for the dead people.
Right. They had to be called arsonists or looters, as I recall, or words to that effect.
And then he was even reading they looked like the funny pages, but while they were trying this guy, so anyway, the real problem with the judge.
Yeah, I'm with you, Holly. Thank you very much for the call. Aida in Stars, Connecticut. Hey, Aida, what's up? Am I saying your name right?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, you got it. Yep, it's Aida. Thank you, Tom, for taking my call.
Sure.
Can you hear me fine?
Yeah,
Okay.
just fine. Yeah.
So, basically you made all the points while I was waiting about the judge, but more so I want to just add that they're controlling the narrative, and like you said, the consequence of this charade that they're putting on is basically a happy far right, right?
Yeah.
And so
A trigger happy far right.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, right? And I think it's another moment, I mean, whatever this result of this trial is, it's another moment that will, bring about kind of a revolution in the thought of, the next America, in a sense, because just as you said, they're trigger happy and they're, gung-ho, I guess, and they want this to happen, but I feel like they're controlling the narrative in that trial, trying to make him look like they're giving him like 1,000 excuses, this white boy. And then even a caller just now that you had, he's like making excuses for the boy. Right. But this doesn't happen like for a black boy, And this is I feel like this should be amplified in the media. Like, why do we keep making excuses for white people who are terrorists?
Yeah.
So, and I'm a Muslim, and I'm a white. I look white, and my husband looks white. But we're always labeled as, kind of outsider or the other. And I see this now. This narrative is being. It just always sneaks in, So that's just kind of one point I wanted to make. Yeah. Thank you, and happy anniversary.
Thanks, Aida. Thank you very much. Thanks for the call, and your points are all brilliant. Spot on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. It's 52 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with you in just a moment. Actually, just 60 seconds. Stick around. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. As Senator Angus King, the independent from Maine who caucuses with the Democrats, pointed out recently on CNN, if you take the states that the 41 Republican senators who are filibustering everything the Democrats do, he said, if you take the states that those 41 senators represent, add up all the population together, you get 24% of the American people. So the situation now is that 24% of the American people have an effective veto. Now, those 21 states, if you add their population together, they represent 7.2 million people out of 331 million people in the United States, which means that they are representing an even smaller percentage of the American populace. It's around 21%. And if you look at the votes that those 41 senators got, it was there were 31 million votes total cast in those elections. That's only 11.9%. It's over, the whole video of it is over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Hey, I've got a couple of lawyers on the phone. Let's start with Lee in Los Angeles. Hey, Lee, it says here you're a lawyer and you wanted to weigh in on the Rittenhouse trial?
Yes, good morning. I'll just clarify, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I'm just a lawyer who follows these situations. I'm not seeing this going anywhere that people want it to see, meaning I am seeing this, he's going to get what he wants, which is he's going to get away with it. One of the reasons starts off with the fact of the charges being brought. In these cases, they always want to go for the highest possible charge with his intent. Intent is it's so difficult to prove in homicide cases. And in this case, like with the police officers, it's subjective belief. Whether or not we like it, he put up a pretty viable belief that he felt his life was threatened. So already to prove homicide seems really hard. This is the same thing that happened with that gentleman in Florida who was protecting his house. The other one is the fact that we permit use of extremely dangerous weapons to protect private property. He supposedly was there to do nothing more than protect a dealership with an armed vehicle. He was a vigilante protecting private property. We allow that as well, in Florida, places like that. We permit
the old castle doctrine.
Right, which is just ridiculous. So, again, he did technically, to some degree, have a legal right to be there. It also goes to the fact that I will say the judge is completely biased, very obviously so. The prosecution, I'm not sure what role they've played in this, as in if they're really trying to bring charges or they're just frustrated that they have to do this charade. I mean, there's just things going left and right, but as a lawyer, there is nothing
You think the
unusual
prosecution's trying to throw the case?
I don't know. I just don't believe they know something's wrong with this case. I think they know they're on an uphill battle is the way I see these cases. The role that they played, I don't know. They brought the charges. What made them decide to bring the highest caliber of charges, I don't know. What made them put people on the stand on their argument that basically shot them in the foot, I don't know. Did they not expect that? Rittenhouse breaking down and causing that reaction. Again, I don't know because I'm a lawyer and I can tell you we do react as people as well as lawyers. So, there's bias in behavior.
Yeah. And watching Rittenhouse break down, that was fascinating. There was no water in his eyes. It's like, wait a minute, is this a performance or maybe he's got a problem? He just doesn't produce tears. I don't know. But Lee, thank you for the call. We'll continue this conversation into the next hour. We're going to be talking right after the break with Naveed Shah about Veterans Day and voting rights, and then we'll get to your calls.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for news readers. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at Angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, We must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided by the secret hope of discovering beyond the present wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. Today is not only Veterans Day, but there's also, before the United States Senate, 3 different pieces of legislation that would expand voting rights. And Naveed Shah is on the line with us. He's with commondefense.us. His Twitter handle is Army of Naveed, N-A-V-E-E-D, or @CommonDefense. And Naveed, pull these 2 threads together for us. How do we support veterans and support voting rights?
Hey, Tom, thanks so much for having me on your show.
My pleasure.
I served in Iraq in 2009 and 2010, and I was there for their second ever national elections. For many of those Iraqis, it was their first time being able to cast a ballot in any election. And for that day, I believe it was January 10th, for once, the American troops who were there on the ground were not the target of the insurgents. Rather, they were targeting ordinary Iraqis on their way to the polls. I think more than 100 people were killed or injured that day because they had to brave bombs and bullets just to be able to go cast their ballot. And seeing what happened here on January 6th of this year, it's hard to believe that, but for me, for a moment, I felt like we had, gone back a decade. And while, our election day, luckily, did not have those kind of, violent attacks, the attacks that our democracy are currently facing are in some ways even worse. They're more sinister because they're being done under the color of law. We have legislation across the country that is, in many ways restricting access to the ballot. Right now, 4.7 million veterans in this country suffer from some sort of disability. And so by restricting access to the ballot, by, cutting off early voting, by, not allowing mail-in voting, by, any number of these types of voter restrictions that GOP legislators across the country are trying to put into place, they are essentially preventing the people who fought to defend our democracy from being able to exercise their fundamental right to vote.
So disabled veterans are disproportionately affected by voter suppression laws that have been passed, these 33 voter suppression laws that have passed in 19 states. Is that the essence of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Many veterans who suffer from disabilities can't stand in long lines to wait to get into a crowded polling place to vote. They need to be able to vote by mail. They need to be able to vote early. They need to be able to cast their ballot in a way that fits their life and their disability. And while veterans are certainly a big portion of this population, there are disabled Americans, from all stripes and all backgrounds who are facing these same kind of challenges.
And we're talking with Naveed Shah. He's an Army veteran, the political director of Common Defense, and also Veterans Against Trump. Common Defense is the largest membership organization of progressive vets in the United States, commondefense.us. So, Naveed, we have three pieces of legislation that would expand voting rights. There's the John Lewis Voting Rights Enhancement Bill. I'm sure I'm mangling the name there, but the one that's named after John Lewis, which has some, some considerable, well, they all have considerable support on the Democratic side. Then you also have the what used to be called H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which is the most expansive of the three. And then you've got the one that Joe Manchin negotiated with Lisa Murkowski and some other Republicans that we know has at least one Republican vote in the Senate, the For the People Act, the Freedom to Vote Act. What are your thoughts, or is your organization taking a position on any of these three, or just arguing that, hey, we've got to do something, damn it, this is wrong?
Well, we've been working on this campaign, almost since the insurrection. And we, on every iteration of the voting rights legislation that has come up, we've been supportive of it because to a certain extent, it is kind of the point now that, yes, let's pass some voting rights legislation. It would be better than what we have now, which is nothing. And unfortunately, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act which has traditionally been passed on a bipartisan vast majority basis, was not even allowed to come up for a debate on the Senate floor last month, just a couple of weeks ago. And now the current iteration, the Freedom to Vote Act that Senator Manchin introduced, we are very supportive of that. We are very supportive of Senator Manchin taking the initiative when S1 or HR 1, the For the People Act, failed to come up with this compromise legislation with his colleague, Senator Murkowski.
Right.
At this point, many states have already started drafting their maps for the next year's, congressional elections, and we need this legislation to pass to prevent any further partisan gerrymandering.
Yeah, Texas has already done it.
Exactly. It comes back to this, that voters should choose their elected officials, not the other way around, right? So if we're allowing them to draw maps in their favor, whether they're Republican or Democrat, it's not fair. And at the end of the day, the voters' voices need to be heard on this issue.
Remind me of the hashtag that is going viral right now on this issue.
Absolutely. It's Vets for Democracy. Our members are tweeting in support that if you want to support veterans on Veterans Day, one easy way to do that is to pass the Freedom to Vote Act.
Right. And in order to pass this, it's going to require either ending the filibuster or drilling another hole in it. There's they drilled a hole in it for Supreme Court justices. They drilled a hole in it for lower court judges and cabinet officials, and they drilled a hole in it for budget items. These have all occurred at different times. Is your organization taking a position on exactly how to get around the filibuster, or are you arguing that, hey, why are not at least 10 Republicans, in favor of voting rights? I mean, when the Voting Rights Act itself, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which had to get renewed every 10 years, it keeps getting renewed. And when it was renewed during the George W. Bush time, which I think was 2005, you probably know better than I, it was renewed unanimously in the Senate. It was non-controversial.
Yeah, absolutely. Having Republican support on this issue would be huge to not only to bolster our voting rights, but also to show all Americans that we have trust and trust the integrity of our election system. And it's disappointing that we can't find those 10 votes. But at this point, we're asking simply for passage of this, whether that means finding another carve-out for voting rights legislation, as it has been done in the past on those other issues you mentioned, or abolishing the filibuster altogether. We wouldn't be opposed to that, because at the end of the day, as a veteran, I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States. The filibuster is not in the Constitution. It's an arcane Senate rule that has historically been used for this types of blockage of civil rights legislation. Correct. So it's really not something that we support. Yeah.
I am completely with you. Naveed Shah, an Army veteran, the political director of Common Defense. The Common Defense, the largest membership organization of progressive vets in the nation. Check it out, commondefense.us. On Twitter, Common Defense, or Army of Naveed, N-A-V-E-E-D. Naveed, thanks so much for dropping by. Great talking with you.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it a lot.
My pleasure, and happy Veterans Day. We'll be back in just a moment. It's 14 and a half minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So much to talk about. I want to get into also the tragic plight of the children of wealthy people. And we're going to pick up your phone calls and continue our conversations from the first hour. And welcome back. Nancy in Woodland, California. Hey, Nancy, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Veterans for Peace. They've had a campaign for many years to, as they call it, reclaim Armistice Day, which of course was the original name for Veterans Day. Because they feel that in their website, they feel that the best way to honor our veterans is to celebrate peace and not war, so that they don't have to go to war. And so people can go to veteransforpeace.org and see what they're all about, and also to see what the various chapters are up to across the country.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Nancy.
Sure. Thanks. Happy anniversary.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to hear from you. I appreciate the call. Vic in Stockton, California. Hey, Vic, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Tom, I'd like to get your comments on my thoughts, which I'll take off the air. So real quick. Okay, so I think the issue with paid parental leave that you talked about with the Women's Council lady is that Republicans hate all social programs that benefit most Americans because they believe the passage of any social program will start a slippery slope mindset among Americans where they'll start voting for Democrats. As a scenario, passage of paid parental leave legislation in this country will get Americans asking for then federally mandated vacations, and they'll ask for universal health care. And pretty soon American citizens will realize that social programs are more important to their lives than the cultural issues that Republicans keep trying to sell them.
And billionaires are going to have to pay part of the tab. Oh, my God.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Vic. I'm with you, and thank you for the call. And this, we'll see where it goes, but I'm completely with you. Mike in Falls, Pennsylvania. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was a gunner's mate from 67, 8, and 9 on a small river patrol boat. And
it's tough stuff, tough duty.
Yeah, but the question I would like to ask you, I heard this morning that the ammunition for his weapon was a hollow point, and he used an AR-15. Is that correct?
I don't know about the hollow point. Yeah, it was an AR-15.
Well, at any rate, I can't emphasize it enough that weapon is not a weapon of self-defense. It is totally a weapon of taking a human's life.
Yeah, it's a weapon of war.
That round, yes, it comes out at such a velocity, and when it hits soft tissue, it tumbles, and it'll, for lack of a better word, or a better description, if it hits you in your right shoulder, it could come out your left toe. That's how destructive that weapon is.
Yeah.
And so I think that the prosecution should emphasize the fact that he wasn't there to defend anybody. He was there to kill people with that weapon.
Well, that's my point. This kid crossed state lines to go. He said he was going to defend a auto body shop or a car shop or whatever it was. But, I mean, who does that, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Who does that? And this was a protest against a black man being killed by the police. And, you know, once again, you know, white guy brings AR-15 to protest against police violence. Surprise.
How did he become proficient with that weapon?
Well,
that's another question.
I'm not sure how much proficiency is required, you know, with a weapon like that. You basically point and pull the trigger. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Mike, thanks a lot for the call. I got to run, but thanks for the call. It's 18 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in just 1 minute. I just have to read a quick ad on the commercial side. I wanted to share with you my thoughts on the terrible plight of wealthy children, and then we'll pick up your phone calls. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Ahead of the United Nations Climate Summit, there is a new dump of documents that's just breathtaking. Out of countries, actually, this time. This isn't just, you know, sleazy companies. The Saudis, the OPEC countries, they're all saying, hey, you know, instead of focusing on getting rid of fossil fuels, why don't we focus on how to get carbon out of the atmosphere and stuff like that? You know, let us keep selling our fossil fuels. And Brazil and Argentina, countries that produce a lot of meat rather than oil, they are all upset because the United Nations Climate Summit, this initial document that they're trying to put out, points out that about a quarter of the world's carbon dioxide emissions are coming from the production of meat, which is pretty breathtaking. And they're saying, oh, hey, let's not talk about meat here. We really don't want to talk about all that. I've got a detailed deep dive into it on a new video that you can find over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. My op-ed today is kind of a recap of my interview with Newt Gingrich earlier in the week, where, you know, and it's titled Breaking Now, the Tragic Plight of the Children of Wealthy People Exposed. You know, where I basically said, Newt, it's terrible to give people free money, right? So that they don't have to work, so that they can just kind of goof off for the whole rest of their lives. This is why you guys oppose welfare and things like that. And he was like, yeah, you know, Franklin Roosevelt said you should give people a job, not welfare, and we don't want to create permanent dependency. And so then I said, well, then why don't we tax rich people, or at least tax the money when they die, tax the money, the unearned income that falls into the lap of their children. And at that point, he was like, wait a minute. And I'm like, no, you're saying that giving kids free money makes them crazy and lazy. Shouldn't we be protecting these wealthy children, or the children of wealthy people? There's an actual real issue here, and it's the one that I brought up with Jennifer Stefano at the very beginning of the program, and that is the difference between what we all agree to as a society are the foundational things that we provide people versus what is welfare. What do we do to catch people when they fall through the cracks? There is no disagreement on the foundational stuff, that government should provide roads for transportation so that we can go visit, you know, grandma. Government should provide fire departments in case your house catches on fire. Government should provide police services. Government should provide public schools. These are non-controversial positions. I realize there's some right-wing crackpots who don't want public schools. There are other right-wing crackpots like, you know, Rand Paul, who think the fire department should be privatized. But they are so far out on the fringe. So we agree that there are these core things that government does. In other countries, if you look at, I mean, just Google sometime, the 10 countries with the best quality of life. I put a link to one of them in my op-ed today at HartmannReport.com. And, you know, the United States doesn't appear on that list. There's multiple 10 best countries lists out there. Some, you know, the best countries to retire in, the best countries to live in, the best countries for quality of life, the happiest people. Multiple studies, multiple lists. None of them have the United States in the top 10. Because every other country says, well, in addition to providing roads and police and fire, And public schools, you should be providing college education, you should be providing health care, and you should be providing paid family leave and sick time. And, you know, Republicans are all like, oh, we can't do that. You're going to have to raise taxes on rich people if we're going to do that. And yeah, I'm fine with that. And you know, the estate tax now, which is, you know, Frank Luntz was hired by, the story is the Walton family. I was looking around this morning to confirm that, and I couldn't find it. But, you know, Frank Luntz is taking credit for it, in any case, is this phrase death tax. But the estate tax has nothing to do with death, other than the fact that it kicks in when a large pile of money is transferred from a person who typically has died, but not always. When a large chunk of money is transferred from a very wealthy person into the hands of a relative who did nothing to earn that money. This is unearned income. Unearned income should be taxed. It should be taxed at least as enthusiastically as all the other forms of income, you know, the income that we work for. And on top of that, we should be using it to provide, you know, the basic services of our country, including, in my opinion, paid time, you know, paid family leave and things like that. So anyhow, that's my rant on that. You can find it over at HartmannReport.com. Let's pick up some of your phone calls. I had a lawyer in Chicago who was on hold for a while, though. He dropped off. But, we got other Rittenhouse calls, too. Lisa in Trevor, Wisconsin. Hey, Lisa, what's on your mind today?
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I just wanted to say in regards to, well, first of all, this is basically in my backyard because I live just a mile over the Wisconsin border, a mile from Antioch, and the whole thing makes me absolutely sick. I don't know if you remember the case back in 2019 where there was a pregnant woman who got into an argument with whoever, and she was shot, and the fetus was killed, and she, not the shooter, was charged with manslaughter for putting herself in harm's way by having the argument with this other person. Wow. And here we have Kyle Rittenhouse, who, I could say, put himself in harm's way by attending this protest. And what scares me is that we've now got the SCOTUS that is right now analyzing the case of the cities that prohibit gun carry, and they're potentially going to overturn that. Yeah. So I believe that we could be looking at many, many more cases of this nature because I think that there's a whole, flock of people out there that would love to get involved like this. For example, look at what they're doing with passing legislation where you can't find somebody guilty if they hit somebody that's in a street protesting. Right. This is just an invitation to allow these guys to do more of this case. And if the SCOTUS does overturn a city's ability to do this, it's basically going to amount to last guy standing because he's going to be the one, or he or she is going to be the one with the narrative. And this is so dangerous. I just cannot believe what's going on in this country. So,
and let's make it very clear, Lisa, this is how countries fall to authoritarianism and fascism.
Exactly. And that's where we're heading. I have no hope at this point. I feel, unfortunately, very strongly that we are going to lose the House and or the Senate, and they're going to have the bit in their teeth, and we're done. I'm actually looking for another country to move to because this scares the crap out of me. They've got the wind in their sails right now. This is
happening all over the world, though, Lisa.
Yes.
I mean, this right-wing movement is international. It is being encouraged by social media, and a lot of the stuff that's being fed into social media is coming out of other countries, out of authoritarian countries that don't want democracies to work.
Absolutely. I mean, you have somebody like Putin that's fueling a huge amount of this, I'm certain.
Oh, yeah. No, well,
Thank you.
It seems to be fairly clear. And my other concern, Lisa, is that, if Rittenhouse walks, we're going to start seeing vigilantes out there shooting up protests left and right. It's
that's what I'm saying.
Stuff.
That's what I'm saying. Especially if the SCOTUS overturns the city's ability to take away
to restrict concealed weapons. Yeah, I'm with you. Yep. Lisa, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We'll be right back. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. We'll be right back. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Common Sense for the 21st Century by Roger Hallam. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse. This is from the foreword. I was there for the past 20 years. Climate activism. It didn't work. We protested in our hundreds of millions. It didn't work. We raised billions to reach people and politicians. It didn't work. We signed countless online petitions. They didn't work. We looked to the United Nations to resolve the crisis. It didn't work. We trusted progressive politicians and their reforms. That didn't work. Al Gore had a big concert and a PR campaign. It didn't work. Countless NGOs, non-governmental organizations, did their best, and it didn't work. I worked with green NGO campaigns, champagne environmentalists, and lying politicians. I was wasting my time. I had a clue back in 2007 that there might be a fundamental flaw with the reformist approach. The problem with the political influence of the industrial billionaires like the Koch brothers and other fossil fuel bosses. It was another warm night in Los Angeles. I was invited to an exclusive event. A Tesla Roadster prototype was going to be shown to press and guests. We took turns riding around the block. I watched in amazement as the Tesla was at the end of the street in the blink of an eye, with barely a sound. I felt like a caveman seeing a television. Incredible. While I was working on a campaign in 2007, I had an idea for how to save the world with a massive music event and a huge fundraising effort led by celebrities to fund the biggest PR campaign to save the environment. It would be a huge global event, just like Live Aid. I sought out a prominent journalist at the Tesla event to tell about my scheme and bask in the glory of his praise. The journalist was Vijay Vithswaram from The Economist, now a life member of this Council on Foreign Relations. After listening carefully to my concept, he smiled and laughed. I was stunned. Laughter? How could I be so wrong? Vijay wasn't being cruel or unkind. He thought I was naive. He said, the fossil fuel industry has enough money to outspend any public relations campaign you might try by 100 times. He carried on talking, but I had stopped listening. I had my answer. He was right. Crestfallen, I sheepishly nodded and walked away. Over the next 12 years, I watched as fossil fuel companies used their vast financial capital to buy political parties, trick NGOs into fruitless schemes like the U.S. Cap and Trade Initiative, sow doubt about climate science in the public discourse, and slow policy reform to a snail's pace. Their strategy worked. As climate skepticism continued to spread, climate change mitigation dropped down voters' priorities. With Trump and Putin in power, it was over. I quit climate campaigning. Then I heard about Extinction Rebellion closing 5 bridges in London. Then they closed central London in April 2019. This was something different. I met Roger Hallam, and he explained his ideas for a radical plan to create real change. This included, first, tell the truth. Climate skepticism was pushed by the mainstream media, which spread doubt on climate science like a plague, leaving inaction in its wake. The scale of the crisis is being played down, and we must get the truth out. Second, nonviolent civil disobedience. We need to get arrested. Tens of thousands of us, more. No more protests, no more petitions. Instead, nonviolent civil disobedience, lots of it, and on a large scale. Close down cities until the politicians take action, or until the people do. Third, universalism. In other words, the ecological and climate crisis should not be owned by any political ideology, culture, age, or gender. As Roger Hallam says, we all have a stake in the future. We should all be allowed to engage in action. I was convinced. We need a new approach to save ourselves and the planet. We need to spark a worldwide rebellion. We need some common sense for the 21st century. That foreword was written by, quote, anonymous climate activist. So this now is the introduction to the book. It is time to grow up and see the world as it is. There are some things which are undeniably real. There are some things we cannot change, and one of those is the law of physics. Ice melts when the temperature increases. Crops die in a drought. trees burn in forest fires. Because these things are real, we can also be certain about what the future holds. We are now heading into a period of extreme ecological collapse. Whether or not this leads to the extinction of the human species largely depends on whether revolutionary changes happen within our societies within the next decade. This is not a matter of ideology, but of simple math and physics. The United Nations has estimated that we need to reduce carbon emissions by half within a decade to have a 50% chance of avoiding a global catastrophe. Of course, this is likely to be an underestimate, as recent science shows permafrost melting 90 years earlier than forecasted and Himalayan glaciers melting twice as fast as expected. The book, Common Sense for the 21st Century, by Roger Hallam, the co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Welcome back, 34 minutes past the hour. So I retweeted a tweet that showed the picture of Rittenhouse with the Proud Boys doing the white power salute. I had said earlier this was right after he killed these people. Apparently I was wrong on that. Just want to correct myself on the air here. Apparently this was months later that he became basically the hero of right-wingers who have fantasies about killing left-wing protesters, sadly. So, but anyhow, for the record. Josh in Minneapolis says here you disagree with me about what?
Well, it's not entirely that I disagree with you. I wish that your show would be a little bit more balanced. I like to listen to both sides of everything. I listen to left-wing radio and right-wing radio, and I like to find my... Well,
if you're listening to the right-wing radio, Josh, you're not listening to both sides on there. But, you know, I opened the show with a debate with a conservative. But, you know, whatever. Make your point. What's your point?
So my point is like, I constantly hear you say, like, about the January 6th insurrection. Right. And you're very quick to always say it's an insurrection. You want, like, everybody prosecuted for that. But I don't think I've ever heard you bring up about all the riots going on. Like, I live in Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis. I've seen the things happening, seen it firsthand that it was almost like a war zone.
Josh, I have said dozens of times, and I said it a lot when this was going on here in Portland, that people who destroy property, people who are rioting, should be arrested and prosecuted. But that doesn't mean that you should show up with an AR-15 and shoot them.
I'm not saying that people need to show up with an AR-15, which was my other point is, if what he was going to do was actually just go there to help protect buildings, stop people from causing damage or from hurting each other. Which is not what he did. And knowing that, well, I'm just saying that if that's what his intentions were, that's what he was believing he was doing, and that's all he intended to do, like that's what he says, then when he went there, yes, he does have every right to protect himself if he's going there knowing that people are assaulting people, people are hurting people, people are armed, and people are getting hurt doing this. So if he's going there and he's just trying to help stop these things, but he also realizes my life might be in danger, I should probably think ahead and have a way to defend myself as well. If that's all he was doing, then he had every right to have that with him and protect himself if he had it legally.
Which he did not.
Maybe a question up in the air.
No, he legally couldn't own an AR-15. He got it through a straw purchaser. He couldn't legally own it. He committed a crime. He was a criminal walking down the street because already he had committed a crime simply by walking down the street with that AR-15. And when a guy walked up to him and tried to disarm him, tried to take it away from him, he killed him. A law-abiding citizen tried to stop a criminal, and the criminal killed the law-abiding citizen, the criminal in this case being Rittenhouse. That's how I'm looking at
it. If he should not have been carrying a firearm if he was doing it illegally.
And
I'm a firm believer that everybody should be carrying their firearms completely legally.
I agree with you.
But
he was not. He was carrying it illegally. He was committing a crime. He crossed state line.
I don't know if he had that, but if the question, in fact, I'm not going to argue if he was carrying something illegally, then yes, then that's something that I would think that he should be prosecuted for.
Yeah.
If he was defending his life, if that's what they're trying him for, and he was being assaulted, like from what I heard of one of the people that he had shot was admitting on the stand that yes, he was attacking him while he got shot. So at that point, it says, well, that to me it says self-defense if this person was attacking him.
Yeah. Well, this is what the jury is going to sort out, Josh. But what disappoints me is that
illegally, I do agree that you should not be carrying something illegally. I'm a firm believer. I believe in the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner, but I also am very strict on you need to abide by every law while using them.
Yeah, I'm with you, Josh. I got to run, but thank you very much, Brad in Prattville, Illinois, or Alabama, excuse me. Hey, Brad, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Quick comment, then a question. Talking about the rich kids having trouble paying taxes on their inheritance. My dad actually passed away when I was 12. We survived on Social Security, and we had to pay taxes on that, and it never made us lazy. So I don't really feel
And by the
too
way,
bad for these guys.
if your dad had passed away before 1983, you wouldn't have had to pay taxes on that Social Security. But Ronald Reagan started taxing Social Security income.
Absolutely. The question that I have, though, about Rittenhouse, somebody called in earlier about whether he could be charged federally, but if he crossed state lines with a firearm with the intention of killing somebody, which I don't see, I firmly believe that he had real intent at minimum. Is that not a federal crime in and of itself? And could he not be prosecuted for crossing state lines?
Well, you would have to establish that was his intention. I mean, he's asserting, first of all, a caller earlier said that Rittenhouse had a friend in Wisconsin buy the weapon for him, so the weapon didn't cross state lines, just Rittenhouse did. Which raises the question, what's the deal with his mom? She was being interviewed by Sean Hannity yesterday, I guess. She was the one who drove him to this riot, right? Did they stop along the way and pick up an AR-15 and stick it in the back of the trunk? I mean, what, really? Number one. And then secondly, he is asserting that he didn't go there with the intention of killing people. He went there with the intention of, protecting property, and he found himself in a position where he had to defend himself. That's the essence of his defense. And
are you seeing any parallels to the Bernie Getz? If you probably remember back in the 80s.
Yeah, I remember Bernie Getz really well. And for people who don't, he was a guy who was on the New York City subway with a concealed handgun, which is illegal in New York. He had no permit for it. And he was confronted by a panhandler, as I recall, or somebody trying to rob him, and he pulled out the gun and shot the guy. And the city of New York was prosecuting Getz, but he became quite the hero there for a while.
I understand. He waited on that train all day to become. He wanted to be a hero, and he waited on that train, rode it all day.
That's right. I had forgotten that part of it. He was looking
in order to put himself in that position.
You're absolutely right. I had forgotten about that. Or as I recall, you're right. We will see how this shakes out. But what concerns me is that you've got a judge whose ringtone for his phone is the Donald Trump theme song. And he ruled early on that you cannot refer to the people that Rittenhouse killed as victims. You may only refer to them as rioters or looters. And, it seems to me like, this thing is in the bag to start out with. So anyhow, Brad, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Matt in Minneapolis, listening on AM 950. Hey, Matt, what's up?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. I kind of wanted to respond to that caller, Josh, that was talking about the riots in Minneapolis. And I wanted to comment and say, and this is something that the mainstream media is missing, is that there were a lot of outside forces that were coming into the city to cause a civil disturbance.
Oh, and look at Umbrella Man. I mean, the first windows that were smashed by a guy who we later learned was either a right-winger or a cop. I forget which. How did that shake out? You live in the area. Do you recall?
Yes. So that was a police officer, as far as I understand. And what I had seen coming into my neighborhood were these guys driving these giant pickup trucks, the coal rollers that they call themselves. They had the blue line stickers on the back of their trucks, and then they also had the Punisher skull on the back, which is another symbol that has been adopted by the white supremacists. And they had came here with the intent of causing a civil disturbance and the police completely withdrew from the area. And this is prior to any voting on any defund the police, and they have continued to be withdrawn from the neighborhoods. Like, it's ridiculous. And these white supremacists were leaving caches of gas cans around the neighborhood. It was scary, very scary.
Wow. Okay.
And I'll take my answer off the air, but Tom, thank you for preaching the good word. And this is something that all of the media keep missing, that these white supremacists came here with the intent of causing a civil disturbance, and they succeeded.
Yeah, I'm with you. Matt, thank you very much for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Million years ago, I was in communication school for television and radio, and they had the original FCC rules, and even a broadcaster had to have a third-class FCC license.
I remember. I had one.
Right. I think that was because in case the board guy who ran the board keeled over, you could take over or something like that. Yeah. But anyway, all those rules fell by the wayside, and it comes down to one thing, which is language. The class I took in there that was called the failure of language, and language is so part of a person that speaks that it's difficult to claim intent. When they draft a law, there's always loopholes which get around the intent. There's the intent and there's the letter of the law. I think when you violate the intent of the law, it's more important than having an argument with the language. And if there was, what's his name, Scalia spent time trying to have a seance with Washington to find out what was in his head, in terms of intent, and it has to be more well defined. I wonder if when they pass a bill or a law, it should have audio files attached to it on what each representative had on their minds, and maybe people too.
Yeah, although the Supreme Court has ruled that it doesn't matter what the intent of the legislators was, what matters is what the law says. I mean, that's the basis of Neil Gorsuch's whole originalism thing, which is now the new right-wing thing on the courts.
Right, but the Second Amendment is a failure of language. Even though it was written well, people are not doing what was originally intended with it.
No, absolutely,
So,
and the intent of the Second Amendment is clearly documented. I wrote a whole book about this, the hidden history of guns in the Second Amendment. It was there so that we could have state militias to replace a standing army during time of peace, and it was there to protect the slave patrols in Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia. I mean, it was just and very straightforward. Bill, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Your points are very well made. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's 46 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Well, I just want to chime in and, kind of point out, I just want to know when we devolved to the point where we, can justify murder for people. I don't know when it became legal. I don't know why we insist on, upholding the Second Amendment when, the NRA, in my opinion, is the National Racist Association, right? It's there, to uphold the Second Amendment, which was there to protect, slave patrols, like you just mentioned. But I just am so flabbergasted why we would even consider letting a person like Rittenhouse ever back into the general population, without him having served a substantial amount of time for the victims that he killed. I just don't understand why why anybody would want to defend what he did or find anything that there was no self-defense there. You should have never been in that situation, and he needs to be held accountable for it, or else we're going to see more and more of this kind of thing. what I'm thinking.
This is my concern. I mean, you know, with Mussolini, it was the black shirts, the volunteer pseudo police, the paramilitary. With Pinochet, there was a name for them, a Spanish name. I'm sorry, I don't recall it, but he had his own version of the brown shirts. They helped with the revolution, with the military coup in what was it, 1973, as I recall. And of course Hitler had his brown shirts, you know, which they were unpaid. They were not part of the official government, at least at first. You know, they ultimately became the SA. But these were paramilitary forces, and that's what I think we're seeing here, as we are seeing the growth all across the United States of paramilitaries who are existing within the law but on the edge of the law, and they're really just picking up the place that the Ku Klux Klan used to hold.
Well, I just hope that they get a grip on this before the next election, or else, you know, things could go horribly wrong. You know, if they don't, you know, if we don't make Kyle Rittenhouse an example and show that these kind of crimes are going to be punished, you know, to the fullest extent of the law, then you don't know where these groups are going to organize, and you know, and it could be really intimidating, you know, going forward.
It's already true.
Are allowed to flourish.
It's already true, Marty. It's already true.
It is. It's part of the voter suppression effort. I mean, you know, when you think about it.
Well, it's a democracy suppression effort, and you know, mess with democracy, and you know, we saw the same thing here in Portland. And that's not to say that, you know, the so-called anarchists on the left, who are, you know, doing property destruction, are basically baiting these people on the right. And on both sides of these battles is the wrong word, but, you know, I lack a better word. On both sides of them, we've got something that represents, in my opinion, a serious threat to, at the very least, law and order, and I mean that in the best possible sense, and at the most, to society as a whole, to our democracy.
Cool, right. I mean, when we have justified murder like going on, and we're like arguing about semantics, and you know, the elephant in the room is like, you know, you just killed somebody. So, right. You know, I think that you know, we got a lot of work to do.
I'm with you, Marty. Thank you. Thanks for the call, and thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. We have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program that centers around this clip from 1978.
The energy crisis is real. It is worldwide. It is a clear and present danger to our nation. These are facts, and we simply must face them. What I have to say to you now about energy is simple and vitally important. Point one, I am tonight setting a clear goal for the energy policy of the United States. Beginning this moment, this nation will never use more foreign oil than we did in 1977. Never.
And he continues.
Moreover, I will soon submit legislation to Congress calling for the creation of this nation's first solar bank, which will help us achieve the crucial goal of 20% of our energy coming from solar power by the year 2000.
What could have been, huh? Check it out at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Jason in Simsbury, Connecticut. You wanted to go back to the debate that we were having about maternity leave, or paid family leave, let's call it.
Yep, exactly, Tom. And as a sales guy, I just want to commend you on being probably the #1 seller of food in the United States. But to my issue, my wife was pregnant and she accepted a new job. We relocated to a different state. They had informed her that they were hiring her under the terms that they knew she was pregnant and they would only afford her 1 week of maternity leave. I was going to be a stay-at-home dad. And so we accepted this terms because we knew we would have somebody at home to provide for our child. She went into labor 9 weeks early and was in the hospital for a full week trying to delay the pregnancy of our son. That is when they started the clock for her maternity time. Oh. She ended up she went into labor on Monday. She had our son on Friday. He was born 9 weeks premature. He spent 5.5 weeks in the NICU in the incubator. She was back at work on Wednesday after having our child on Friday.
Wow.
And this is the problem.
That should not be in America.
You would think. Yeah. You would think. And, there were looks that she got in the office of how in the world can somebody be coming here, but she was in management. And this is the direction that she was receiving from her superiors. And so just the sheer fact, she looked like a war hero to her underlings, but, this doesn't need to be the case.
Yeah. We have as a society here in the United States of America, we have put the interests of business ahead of the interests of people. And business, I'm all in favor of business. I've been a business person my whole entire life. But business should be subordinate to society. As a society, as a country, we set up the rules of the game of capitalism so that capitalism can help us all, not so it can exploit us all. I mean, it's a fundamental misunderstanding on the right, and frankly, in my opinion, of exactly why we do things like paid family leave. Jason, thank you for that story. Go ahead.
And the right wants us to be these worker soldiers. How can you go and do your job when your newborn kid is hooked up to 67 wires trying to get his lungs function?
Yeah. No, I'm
that's my point.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, Jason. I'm glad you guys made it through. I'm glad your son made it through. And, we need to clean this up. Thank you very much for the call. Mark in Portland. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I was just wondering if there is some kind of first of all, I'm wondering, is this judge, was he appointed or was he elected?
I don't know how they do it in Wisconsin.
And then I'm wondering if there's a judicial malfeasance review board or some type of review board for judges.
There are, and but I haven't seen him do anything that I think is, going to get him hauled up before that kind of a oversight.
Well, he's clearly showed evidence of partisanship toward the defendant. I mean, that's been clearly documented. I mean, we can really see that in how his actions were against the prosecutor.
Well, I'm not sure that kind of bias. Again, this is a question for a lawyer. I never went to law school, so I don't know. But my understanding is that judges have huge latitude. I mean, they can be just totally opinionated fools, or asses, or they can be good people by the book, and there's this whole spectrum.
It just seems like he really crossed the line. I mean, I think a lot of people agree that he crossed the line.
You mean when he said you couldn't refer to the people as victims and that kind of stuff?
That, and then he wasn't allowing, other types of evidence, like showing the possible credibility of Kyle Rittenhouse. Even the pictures of him with the Proud Boys and showing the white power symbol and everything else. I mean, that gives some type of evidence to the character of the defendant, and I think that should have been allowed. I mean, whether or not that could potentially be part of his motivation.
I think if that photo had preceded the killing or immediately followed it, which was what I believed to be the case until about a half hour ago when somebody corrected me on Twitter and I read the article, the Vanity Fair article that laid out that it was months later. I think had it been within that time frame, yes. If it happened a couple of months later, well, hey, he's now the hero of the Proud Boys and they're going to take a picture with him and he's going to do the white power symbol. That doesn't mean that he was thinking that way when he showed up there. And the whole thing of murder has to do with state of mind.
Okay. Well, yeah, I could see your point on that. I just wanted to leave you with a short quote by Abraham Lincoln.
Go for it.
And you may for this, but it says, labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor. It could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is superior to capital and deserves much higher the consideration.
Yeah, I think that's one of the finest things that Lincoln ever said. I love that quote. Mark, thank you very much. Thanks for the call. And thanks for listening to us. We'll be right back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for news readers. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at Angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.
We say fight back!
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering, beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Common Sense for the 21st Century by Rob.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. Wanted to just kick this off with a geeky science. This is something to be concerned about, frankly. Dr. Eric Feigelding actually first flagged this for us back a couple of weeks ago when he was on the program, talking about how deer in Michigan were found to have COVID. And this is now Melody Schreiber writing over at theguardian.com. The headline, as COVID recedes in U.S., a new worry emerges, wildlife passing on the virus. This is pretty shocking stuff. First of all, you'll recall back in November of last year, they destroyed 17 million mink in Denmark. It was like one of the largest mink farms in the world where they raise mink to kill them for their fur, and they got COVID, and it not only had COVID infected the mink, but then the mink, the COVID that was in the mink not only mutated, but it also infected a human being. Now the mutation was not a particularly dangerous mutation, but a human being got the virus from the mink. Well, now we're seeing around the world, SARS-CoV-2 has been reported in cats, in dogs, in ferrets, in minks, in lions, in tigers, in pumas, and in gorillas. And recently in the Denver Zoo, the hyenas tested positive. Now they're finding that 1/3 of the deer in Iowa who were sampled over a 9-month period had active infections, with a peak of 80% testing positive between November and January, the beginning of this year. This is not good stuff. The Melody Schreiber notes, nearly everything about their study shocked the scientists. They knew deer could be infected, but they were stunned by the numbers. 4 out of 5 deer tested positive at the highest peak, as well as high viral loads that were, quote, truly gobsmacking. This, should concern us all. My sense of it is that this pandemic has a long way to go, and that we're entering into what's going to be essentially a new era for humanity. Now, the big question is whether little kids growing up will get some kind of an immunity to the COVID virus from getting it when they're young and not, melting down. It doesn't look like this particular virus, this coronavirus, an infection with it doesn't look like it does produce long-lasting immunity, and that's kind of a scary thing. And of course, as you get older, your vulnerability to it increases substantially. So that's one possibility, is that if that is the case and remains the case, that the new normal for the human race is going to be wearing masks all the time, socially distancing all the time. We're actually going to have to, in a way, essentially reinvent how human culture works. And then, on top of that, getting vaccinated every 6 months. The front page of the New York Times today has a chart that shows that, 6 months out, the Pfizer vaccine, at least according to the study done in the United States, is down to 50% of the effectiveness that it had in the first, months after it was taken. So, that might be our new normal. People wear masks all the time. We change how our workplaces work. We change our ventilation systems so that they have ultraviolet light, antiviral UV light in them. And we reinvent our schools. This is all possible. Or the other possibility that I'm not seeing a lot of discussion about, but it has happened with other viruses, is that, and in fact, there's a lot of speculation that many of the common cold viruses and some of the upper respiratory viruses started out this way, is that you've got a really, a slightly deadly virus here right now, 1% death rate, that the Delta variant overwhelmed the original one, both the Alpha, which was the second major iteration of it, and the original SARS-CoV-19. It overwhelmed them because it was more contagious. Well, if one comes along that's even more contagious than Delta, and it's less likely to kill, it could push the Delta out of the virus gene pool, just like Delta has pushed out the original COVID virus. The original COVID virus pretty much no longer exists in the United States. What's happened, and around much of the world, what's happened is that the Delta variant has replaced it. Now you've got this other variant, this Mu variant, which is also, very, very deadly and coming along. But if one comes along that's less deadly, then, it could be that this little moment of time is very much like the moment of time when, the flu first emerged or the common cold first emerged, at least according to some theories. So, I don't have any great scientific proclamation for you here. This is purely informed speculation, and I'm not presenting myself as a physician or a scientist either. But I think it's fascinating stuff. And so anyhow, we've got a spot that we're going to play for you at the bottom of the hour that you're going to want to hear. But let's get back to our conversations. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. In particular, the Rittenhouse trial. Nicholas in San Cristobal, Mexico. Hey, Nicholas, what's on your mind today?
Thomas, thank you for taking my call. Let me see if I can say this so that it makes sense. I was having a discussion last night with a retired judge from Connecticut, a close friend of mine here, and she said something very interesting. She said, we were talking about the Rittenhouse trial, and she said, are you aware that the system, the judicial system, sometimes defends or attempts to defend, with the assumption they're going to win in the defense, chooses to defend the otherwise indefensible? And I said, why? How? To what purpose? To what point? And she said, well, it's often to send a different message to a different group of people. I asked her to clarify that, and she said, well, in the case of Rittenhouse, She said it may be an attempt to send a message to protesters that they will not be safe at protests, which really set me back. And I got to thinking, and we talked at some length about this, and she had me fairly well convinced that this is something that flies under the radar, if you will, and that the defense may be trying to send that message in this defense of Rittenhouse, this little murderer, really, as I see it, to send a greater message to the protesters: stop protesting or you too may get killed. Do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, the idea would be to discourage future protests, of course. So
it's chilling.
What she was saying.
I mean, that's exactly what the brown shirts were doing, what the black shirts were doing, what Pinochet's guys were doing. You know, trashing protesters, killing protesters.
Exactly.
You know, this is like Kristallnacht all over again, which was a year ago this month, this week actually, and not a year ago, but you know, however many years ago. But the anniversary was this week. Let me ponder that, Nicholas. That's a pretty giant concept to lay on us all, that the judge and the prosecutors are essentially trying to send the message to would-be protesters, particularly people protesting racialized police violence, that in the future you will be putting yourself at even greater risk. And so don't even think about protest. That's stunning. Nicholas, let me ponder it. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for sharing that. Brett in Seattle. Hey, Brett, what's on your mind?
Well, I had by the way, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
I had an idea from, the reality TV show The Voice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should be selecting jurors, and they should be anonymous so that neither the defense nor the prosecutor knows the color of the skin of the person who may end up being on the jury. And I don't know how we would go about doing that. It'd probably have to be state by state. But yeah. I think that would...
There were, I believe, 8 black potential jurors who were struck by the defense.
Yeah.
I don't see how you could do that, Brett. I think, because you want to be able to interrogate somebody who's going to hold your client's life in their hands. You want to be able to see their affect. Right. No, I get what you're saying, and it reminds me kind of the, wasn't it Britain's Got Talent, or there's one of those singing shows where they have the person singing without being able to be seen the first time, and they judge them based on something other than their appearance.
Yeah, exactly. The Voice.
The Voice. Thank you. And maybe there's some way to pull that off, but I think instead having stricter penalties for people, for racially biased jury selection would be a starting point. I realize it's theoretically illegal.
And the judge too.
Yeah, and the judge too. There you go. Brett, thank you for the call. By the way, Sean looked it up during the break. This judge was appointed back in the 80s? Back in the 1980s. He's been reelected every single time. He's 75 years old, and he's the oldest circuit judge in Wisconsin. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Fair and only slightly unbalanced. We'll be back with your calls right after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Bob in Asheville, North Carolina. Hey, Bob, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hello, Tom. A quick shout-out to my fellow veterans today. I'm a retired faculty member, and back in 2008, when President Obama won his first election night, I had a set of twins that were sophomores in my class, and they were back home at their parents' house, and they texted out to their friends a call to arms to kill this in, blah, 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 blah.
To kill Obama?
The next morning, yes. By the next morning, feds had stormed their homes and arrested them both. Wow. And confiscated all their guns, all their computers, and they were at the parents' house. So the parents ended up with charges as well for aiding. These two students were thrown out of college, obviously. They lost all their guns, all their gun rights. They'll never be able to hold a federal position, which the Fish and Wildlife, I thought, was their goal. They would never get a job with feds or state. But why, under the Cheney presidency, it happened so quickly that this justice came to bear? But
well, there's a law against threatening the President of the United States. There's a very specific law about that. I don't know if it came out of the Lincoln assassination or the McKinley assassination or what, but there is a specific law. And
exactly. And Wise Kozer running around grinning about free speech and comedy, and I don't know why they're not being able to
So are you suggesting, Bob, that the law that says that you can't encourage the assassination of the president should be extended to be basically you can't encourage the assassination of anybody?
I would think that should be a threat that should be addressed.
Yeah.
Lawfully somehow. And it's rampant now.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's troubling is, I don't know if you caught Rachel Maddow's program the night before last, or maybe 3 nights ago, where she had on these election officials who are getting explicit death threats. Well, Reuters did the reporting. In fact, I talked about it on this program, the morning, I talked about it in the program that day, and then she did it on her show that night, about this Reuters report where they tracked down these guys who literally were making death threats to election officials and were proud of it. And the police never showed up. And this is technically illegal. I mean, not technically, it is illegal to make death threats. And it's not prosecuted.
These were 2 white young men threatening to kill the first black president of the United States, and it was instant justice.
Yeah.
And it's happening now, from teachers to medical workers to elected officials, even our president, and it's just nothing's happening.
Yeah, these are the early stages, Bob, of a vigilante society, and vigilante societies tend to become fascist societies fairly rapidly, and I think that I'm very concerned about this. I think the many people who are concerned about this are right to be concerned about it.
And I'm afraid Rittenhouse will walk, and that's just going to encourage more vigilanteism.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am with you. Bob, thank you. Thanks for sharing that story.
Anniversary.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, good to hear from you. Wow. Yeah, you do hear stories from time to time about somebody threatening the president, and boom, off they go. Threatening election officials? No, not a problem. Right? Threatening the media? Not so much. It's incredible. We'll be back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Stick around. Thom Hartmann Program. Viagra for your brain. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So we have a new video op-ed over at thomhartmann.com. So have you ever heard of molnupiravir? It's a new drug that actually looks like it reduces the probability that you will end up hospitalized or dead from COVID-19. It's a 5-day course. You take a pill every day for 5 days. It costs Merck, the company that is selling it, $17.74 to make that 5-day, 5 pills. And they are selling it to you and me, to the federal government, for $712 per 5 pills, per, treatment course. And you say, what? And here's where it gets really interesting. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which is part of the Department of Defense, provided $10 million of funding to Emory University to develop this drug, and $19 million in additional grants came from the National Institutes of Health. We paid to develop this drug, and now we're going to pay $700 for it? Really? Check it out. There's a video over at thomhartmann.com all about it. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. David in Spotswood, New Jersey. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Hey, I attend the Poor People's Campaign rallies, and the Rittenhouse case as it's folding concerns me. And I'd like to say I think
in the next, I'm concerned also in the next 2 election cycles that the Republicans are going to win, because people are very concerned about inflation, and the Democrats aren't standing up to what the truth is. And the truth is, a lot of companies went under during the pandemic, and corporate power has increased since the pandemic. It's increased from 5% to 12%, according to the Federal Reserve.
Competition has decreased, in other words, which leads to increases in pricing. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but they're not. The mainstream media. Yeah, thank you, by the way. The mainstream media isn't pointing that out.
Right.
And I think the Democrats could win by rehashing the antitrust policies that they used to have before Reaganism.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good political strategy or not, but it would be a good thing for our country, it would be a good thing for our economy, and a good thing for our democracy. So, David, are you suggesting that if Rittenhouse walks, that you think that you're agreeing with Nicholas from San Cristobal, Mexico, basically, that is, or maybe even the way this trial is being conducted, is really just a signal to anybody who might think about protesting against police or government violence not to do so in anticipation of a time when we become a fully authoritarian country?
Yes, and I mean, as it is, I feel uncomfortable when I attend those rallies. There's always police there, which I think is absurd.
Well, you might think it's absurd until the Rittenhouses of the world show up with AR-15s.
Right. But I'm saying that the police, when I show up, the police don't look too happy. You don't look like they're in solidarity with us.
Yeah.
I don't feel a sense of solidarity, and I get them. My uncomfortableness is going to definitely going to increase.
Yeah, so in other words, this has already had a chilling effect from your point of view, and as far as you're concerned. David, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that with us. Annie in Sugar Grove, North Carolina. Annie, what's on your mind today?
Well, it's the Rittenhouse case, and I heard on Democracy Now!, Elie Mystal. I think you've had him on your show.
Yeah, we have. He's a good guy.
I heard that, he's a really good guy. I need to rewatch the show when it comes on later on Free Speech TV. I caught the very end of his interview with Amy Goodman, and he said this prosecutor that's prosecuting the case, he's the same prosecutor that didn't press charges against the cop that shot Jacob. I don't remember if that's his first name, his last name. Jacob is in his name. He's paralyzed. He's not dead. He's partially paralyzed.
And was that the shooting that provoked the so-called riot that Rittenhouse showed up for?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
In Kenosha. Right. Yeah. Jacob such and such. He was trying to get in his car. He was walking away from the cops, and they shot him 7 times in the back.
Right.
And he's partially paralyzed. But yeah, that prosecutor that's prosecuting the Rittenhouse case, he did not bring charges against the police officer that shot.
So you think he's throwing the case?
Man. Well, I want to piggyback up on that call the woman made, roughly a half hour ago or something like that. She thinks that this is just a show trial, that, we're really trying to do this and make it look like, justice. But so once I heard that comment from that woman, and then I had the memory of what Elie Mystal said this morning, I thought, oh, my goodness. And that judge, he's 75 years old. He should have retired a while back.
Well,
he doesn't even know what an iPad is. He was having trouble with, like, when you spread, on your iPad or your phone, you spread a photo so you can zoom in. He didn't want that ability.
But he does know how to put the Trump theme song on his iPhone as his ringtone.
Right. Good point, Tom. Good point.
He can't be completely either that, or he's got a 17-year-old in his family who does it for him. But
yeah, they were trying to explain to him that it's just, and he's like, no, it's anyway. It scares me too, and I'm close to your age, and I've never seen our country here in North Carolina. There's a bunch of Trump people with the F. Biden flag. A couple of them have those.
Yeah.
And then they do this, they peel rubber and run stop signs and peel rubber through intersections and in parking lots and stuff. And the cops do nothing. They're all white. They do nothing.
It's impotent men trying to proclaim their potency, I think, is an awful lot of what's going on. Annie, thank you very much for the call. We should revise the Small Penis Gun Club.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
On the other side of this break, I've got to share with you the erectile dysfunction ad, and I will continue picking up your phone calls. Stick around.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich in dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So we have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com, and it's about 18 U.S. Code 2384, which is a law that was published back in put on the books on June 25th, 1948. It was updated in 1956, and it's very, very straightforward. It says, if two or more persons in any state or territory or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States, they shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 20 years or both. Tell me that doesn't perfectly describe what happened on January 6th. Seditious conspiracy. The video's at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. At represent.us, as in represent us. They put together a bunch of really cool videos over at represent.us. The headline on their website is, "We're saving American democracy, join us." And in fact, their tagline says, "Represent Us brings together conservatives, progressives, and everyone in between to pass powerful laws that end corruption and fix our broken political system." And they've got a new ad out that is just spectacular. It's a little over 2 minutes. And as soon as the ad is done, I'll get back to your phone calls. So if you're on hold, just hang on. But I want to play this ad for you because it is just so precious. It is just so brilliant. So here it comes right now.
Is your democracy flaccid? Trouble maintaining a strong coalition? Tired of the parade of disappointing performances? Then you might be one of the 330 million Americans suffering from electile dysfunction.
I get all excited about a new bill.
The debate gets all hot and heated.
We'll move things to the floor.
And right when we're about to achieve a joint resolution, bam.
Total government shutdown.
Premature capitulation.
I don't know, every time I get an election, I think, maybe this time will be different.
Filibustering just doesn't make me feel good anymore.
It's embarrassing, okay?
Fortunately, there's the Freedom to Vote Act.
The Freedom to Vote Act?
What's the Freedom to Vote Act?
The Freedom to Vote Act, what does that mean?
The Freedom to Vote Act ends your tired, sagging, floppy relationship with politics by making Election Day a holiday across the country, banning gerrymandering, expanding voter access, increasing integrity, blocking foreign interference, empowering everyday citizens, and healing our democracy.
Now my election is rock solid, and it works everywhere.
Oh, it works everywhere.
And it's safe.
It used to take me forever to find the location. to vote.
But with the FTVA, we have all day to get to the polls.
And it only takes 2 minutes.
Which I prefer, honestly.
She really does.
The Freedom to Vote Act is only for democracies healthy enough for electoral activity. Talk to your representative if you are experiencing greased palms, lined pockets, dictators, neo-fascists, or other pre-existing conditions, as you may not be healthy enough for the FTVA. Passing FTVA may cause an increase in being heard, power, a full expression of your inalienable rights, representation, and a rare federal condition called accountability. If you experience voting lines that last over 4 hours, call your senator, as they have not passed the FTVA. Talk to your senator about the Freedom to Vote Act and demand safer and more satisfying elections today.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. Okay, let's pick up some of your phone calls here. James in Houston. James, did I get a detail wrong that Rittenhouse's mom did not drive him to Wisconsin? What did I miss?
Yeah, Tom, and like a true libertarian, I love the truth to be free. But, yeah, Kyle drove himself to Wisconsin and went to his buddy Dominic's house. And then then Dominic drove him to the actual riot. His mom was actually back in their home state. But furthermore, what's alarming in these conversations is y'all talk about this judge being biased when he's defending the Constitution of the United States. And it's clear from the facts that y'all have had to correct already and that I'm correcting now that clearly y'all aren't watching this trial. If this trial ain't a matter of self-defense no longer lives in America. Kyle Rittenhouse defended himself against serious bodily injury or death, which is what the Wisconsin law states.
Well, that's going to be up to the jury, James. And you know, to the best of my knowledge, nobody else shot a weapon on that day. So, you know, how is he defending himself? A guy tried to take his gun away from him, and he shot him.
A guy that said, if I catch you alone, I will kill you, tries to take his gun away while he's alone.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it shakes out, James. We're going to see how it shakes out.
What I'm concerned is that you're already setting a narrative, Tom, that this was a pre-motion.
I think that when you go to a protest, a riot, whatever you want to call it, you go to something with an AR-15, you have crossed the boundaries of rational discourse. You have become the problem, not the solution to the problem. And if James, if you think, or other people in America think that the solution to the problems that our social problems in America is for us to all get out in the streets with AR-15s, God help America.
No, I think we can't lose track of our Second Amendment, but
this has nothing to do with the Second Amendment.
Just because you carry a gun does not make you a murderer, Tom. Cops carry guns every day.
He did kill 2 people, James.
Do what?
He killed 2 people.
Yes, he killed 2 people, and he wounded a third, and the third, quite frankly, is lucky to be alive. Yes, the third came up to him with a gun pointed at his head. That is self-defense, Tom.
Well, it may well be, and we'll see what the jury says. But again, I'm saying if you show up with an AR-15 to anything,
does it make you a murderer?
No, it doesn't. But if you kill people, in my opinion, it does. James, thanks for the call. Marty in Idaho Falls, Idaho. Hey, Marty, what's up?
Oh man, I'm glad to hear from you, Tom. But I kind of agree with you. But on the case when he was at the gas station and he had that phone call from his buddy, then why didn't he call the guy that he got lost with in the gas station? That's one point. And then when he ran up to where he was supposed to be at, and the guy was on the other side of the truck, and he had a fire extinguisher, and he got spooked, looked like he got spooked and dropped it. If the guy wanted to kill him, why didn't he kill him right then?
I don't know. You know, Marty, because this trial is on at the same time my show is on, I have not been able to watch it and follow it. So, you know, at that level of granular detail, I'm not that well informed, which is why I'm largely having to keep to some of the larger principles here. But, you know, so I don't know the answer to your question. Gary in Alpharetta, Georgia. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Hello, Thom Hartmann. Thank you. Greed has no heart. It's America's greatest challenge.
Okay.
It's America's greatest challenge. It encompasses all our realistic endeavors in life. Now, I called just for 2 things. about the rule of law. We, in my opinion, we are at the defining moment, at least since I've been living, since Watergate, to define the rule of law. We let this narcissist get away with this, not providing records. He's not president. He thinks he's king, yet he's not king. And the analogy to me is, you talk about this virus has killed so many people across the world, let alone in America. I think there's a correlation here. It's killed people. Well, if we don't get a hold of this, if we don't take a stand about this rule of law, now, the defining moment in American history, again, after Watergate, it's going to kill even more of our democracy moving forward. We won't have a republic as we know it.
Yeah. Gary, here's my concern, and I think it's running parallel to yours. I back in the 80s and 90s, I did international relief work all around the world, and I was in countries where people were dying around me and where death was a fairly common thing. I was in Uganda during a massive famine. I was in Colombia. Buildings were literally blown up within 6 blocks of where I was staying. 3 different buildings went up. I was in Peru when the Shining Path was doing their stuff. And what I've noticed is that life becomes less valuable. When a lot of people start dying, there becomes this kind of sense that permeates society, like, okay, this is the new normal, and human life is not as important. Human life is not as valuable. And yeah, if somebody gets killed, they shouldn't have been there or whatever. You start coming up with excuses and things. And I think that having a coronavirus kill 750,000 of us, at least according to Deborah Birx, 130,000 of us who died were absolutely unnecessary. Those people died as a consequence of Donald Trump saying, well, American life is not so valuable. Is that I think that our society is rapidly moving in the direction of the societies that I saw in Colombia and Peru and Uganda and in other countries, frankly, where life simply didn't have the value that it once had. And that leads to really, really bad stuff. I mean, that leads to government overreach, that leads to neo-fascism. It's terrible. And I'm getting that sense
We've lost our purpose.
Well, I think, I think that's a predicate to the whole thing. Absolutely. Gary, thank you for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls in just a moment. It's 45 minutes past the hour. It's the place where despair is not an option. Although concern, yeah, we're concerned. And welcome back. Let's see here. Trat in Lakeland, Florida. Hey, Trat, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you taking my call.
Sure.
Just wanted to make a few points in the Rittenhouse case. Mental illness and drug abuse needs to be addressed at some point along
I'm sorry,
the line.
Trat. Your phone is a little muffled. What about drug abuse?
Mental illness and drug abuse needs to be addressed somewhere along the line, because I believe the first guy that Rittenhouse shot had to be crazy or on drugs to rush a man holding an AR-15. Whether he was legal to carry it, he definitely was not, and he definitely is guilty. I agree with you of being a minor in possession of a firearm illegally. Murder, no, that's clearly self-defense. He had been beaten in the head with a skateboard, kicked in his face, attacked by a mob, and anyone that is not insane would have defended their life in that situation.
Which raises the question then, Trat, why is the prosecution prosecuting him for murder when, it appears that it was self-defense, rather than prosecuting him for showing up at a riot with an AR-15?
I would say it's more than likely political, and that would be my.
Well, that takes us back to Nicholas's neighbor, who's a former Connecticut judge, saying that what the defense or what the prosecution and the judge in this case are trying to do is say to the rest of America, be careful when you protest, because we're going to let people kill you.
I agree with what you're saying. Be careful when you protest. There's always going to be a level of danger. And when you start attacking people holding assault rifles, you're putting yourself at grave danger.
We had here in Portland, we had a guy who was attacked by, this was a left-winger, actually an anarchist, whatever you want to call him, who was attacked by a right-winger at a protest here. And in response to that attack, he shot the right-winger. He then fled, and when the police found him, they put like 18 bullets in him as he walked out to his car with a phone in his hand. It's like they executed him because, hey, he had killed a right-winger. Or at least that's how it looks. I mean, it's like a completely different standard of justice, right? You kill a right-winger, you get executed by the police. You kill two left-wingers, and you have a self-defense option.
Well, anytime you want to attack people that were clearly not posing a threat to you, whether he was holding an assault rifle or not holding an assault rifle, he was clearly...
there's I believe there's a fair body of law that suggests that simply holding a gun represents a threat in the minds of many people.
That's in the minds of many people, but that's not what the law says at this current time. Now, he was not allowed to hold that weapon. He's guilty of that, but he has the right to defend himself. The first rule of nature is self-preservation.
Yeah. We'll see how it shakes out. Trat, I understand what you're saying, and we will have to see how this shakes out. Thanks for the call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. The media is pushing this crazy narrative that with regard to masks and vaccines and COVID and all this kind of stuff, that America is divided. Like, half of us want masks and half of us don't, or half of us want vaccines. It's just not true. 75% of Americans have received at least one dose of vaccine. 70% of Americans think that we should have mask mandates in all of our schools. Only 17%, this is from the latest Pew studies, polling, only 17% of Americans are opposed to mask mandates in schools. And what we have is this tiny fringe that is being cranked. Now we're learning from China as well as from Russia and perhaps other countries, plus the people in, a relatively small number of people, Trump followers, who think that tearing the country apart is a good thing and somehow it'll hurt Joe Biden and hurt the Democrats in the next election. It's crazy. I got a whole video rant about this over at ThomHartmann.com that you can check out. And welcome back. Norman in Talbot, Tennessee. Hey, Norman, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how's it going, Tom?
Good.
Long-time listener. I just want to bring up one point that happens with these situations. Seems like that when the perpetrator of a murder or a killing only gets one, they only get one side, and that's the person still alive,
right?
Not the person that's gotten killed. And I watched this happen just time and time again.
So you're saying that the people that Rittenhouse shot are not, their stories are not being told or not being told well in this courtroom, or not even being allowed to be told.
Right. In other words, we don't know what they did because it's all Rittenhouse, and he's trying to save his butt, at all costs.
Yeah.
And that's what my little theory.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. Norman, thank you. Thanks for that. Mike in Baltimore, Maryland. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm so tired of listening to folks try to justify what this man did, or this child did. So first of all, you go across state lines. strike one. Two, you have an illegal weapon that you were purchased that you have illegally. Three, strike three. Strike four, who actually deputized you to protect anything to walk around anyone's street with an AR-15?
Right.
And here's the other thing. Everybody's talking about, oh, he was attacked. He was attacked. He was only attacked after he had already shot one person. So, therefore, please, stop with your whataboutisms and, oh, my God, it's self-defense. So if I have my legal gun and I just saw him shoot two people and I put 3 holes in him, am I going to be a hero? Am I going to be claiming self-defense? Or am I going to be locked up, thrown away, up under the jail, and have everybody that's defending that boy right now?
Yeah. Sadly, Mike, it depends on which side. Sadly, Mike, it depends on which side you're on, right? Obviously,
exactly.
It's just like I said earlier, the guy here in Portland who shot a right-winger came and tried to attack him. He shot the guy in the gut, and who died. The right-winger died, and he went on the run. And when the cops found him, staked out the place where he was in rural Oregon, as he walked out to his car, they just opened fire on him. Just executed him. And
well, that's how they treat people on the other side. They don't
right.
see,
because he killed a right winger. You can't do that in America. You can't.
I'm sorry. They don't see black people as being human. We are not human. We have no feelings. We have no emotions. We have nothing. We only have rage and uncontrollable desire to commit violence in their eyes. So therefore, please stop. I don't see the violence over here. I see it on the right side, majority Caucasian. I'm sorry. Let me call a spade a spade. Everybody wants to talk around in circles. No, the only reason people are defending this boy is because he's white. And the only reason this judge is defending this boy is because he is white. And he killed 2 black people.
No,
so
actually, the people he killed were white people, Mike. They were, weren't they? Yeah.
No. The people that he killed were 2 black people.
Oh, my.
He shot 1 white guy.
Okay, I'm going to have to do some homework here, Mike. but I agree with your sentiment. It's like, there very much is sides taking going on here or whatever. But
the guy that tried to grab his gun, after he had shot the white guy in the arm or in the hand, the guy that survived was black. The other guy that tried to hit him with his skateboard was black. Yes.
Okay, Mike. Thank you. Thank you for.
Thank you.
I've got to do some more research on this, I guess. Deborah in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm a longtime listener and first-time caller, and I think Mike pretty much summed up a lot of what I was going to say. I don't know. I thought one of the guys he killed was the white guy that threatened to set. Kyle Rittenhouse on the stand said that man said he would kill him if he got him alone. Right. But there's absolutely no audio of that.
Yeah.
No evidence of that whatsoever that man ever said that.
Right.
And all he was carrying was a plastic bag.
Right, so it's like the George Zimmerman defense.
Right, right. And there was, this is not self-defense. I mean, you're talking about somebody walking down the street with an AR-15. I would feel threatened. I would feel my life was in danger. So would I have the right to kill him for, walking down the street with an AR-15? And from what I understand, the other people were not armed except for the last man who's still alive.
Yeah, the guy who lost part of his arm. Yeah, that's my understanding too. Is that they were both unarmed.
Yeah.
Terrible thing. Deborah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Liz in Los Angeles. Liz, we just have a few seconds. You got a quick point you want to make?
Yes, the U.S. Constitution says a well-regulated militia, the right to bear arms is conditional.
To a militia. I agree with you. Anthony Scalia doesn't and the Supreme Court doesn't, but I agree with you, Liz. Liz, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Thank you for being with us today. I got to do some homework here. As I said, I can't watch the trial while I'm on the air. So anyhow, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll continue this conversation. Tomorrow's Anything Goes Friday as well. So, anything else you want to bring to the conversation, let's do it. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery, CBD for sleep and pain relief. More info is available at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Ground News, a well-rounded perspective for news readers. More info at ground.news/Tom. Angie, for any project on your to-do list. More info at angie.com. Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com. And ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom.